Senator Melissa Wintrow serves from Boise, and she sits on the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, the Health and Welfare Committee, and the Judiciary and Rules Committee. She joins us this week to discuss major budget cuts, her legislative priorities, and how you can be involved in the legislative process. And thank you so much for joining us today, Senator Wintrow. We really appreciate your time. The first question that I wanted to ask you is, what has the general atmosphere in the legislature been like this week, and what are some of the major events that have been happening?
Well, on the Senate side, and since I'm in the Appropriation and Finance Committee, I think the general mood is very tense. There have been some conflicts over budgets. Last week, the legislature passed on a very narrow vote, I think it was one vote, to cut all state agencies in the current year by another 1%, additionally to what the governor had already cut at 3%, so it's a total of 4% in the current year, which is about $131 million in this year, even though we're halfway through. And in all the maintenance budgets built in a 5% ongoing cut, which is another $143 million. And so this last week, I voted against that rescission bill because you're just basically taking an axe to all the budgets instead of really looking to see, what needs to be cut and what needs to be added to. And that's really what was the argument on the Senate floor. But it did pass by one vote, so I think things have been very tense. And we've seen budgets being voted down in JFAC, which is the Finance Appropriation Committee, and just a lot of, I think, fighting about, all that's happening.
So I know that you mentioned that you voted against that additional 1% cut, but can you tell us a little bit more about what that actually represents and what that additional cut could mean for your constituents?
Well, as you may recall, or other people on your show have maybe spoken about, but last year the legislature voted to pass $453 million in revenue reductions, whether they were in tax decreases or the school voucher program. That revenue, that $453 million really cut the revenue hard. It took a stark dip downward, and that really wrecked the structural balance of the budget. And because of that cut so hard, and with some of the economic uncertainty that we had, revenues were cut that hard, we didn't have enough to cover all the bills, right? So that's kind of like in your own household. If you say, oh, I know I have to send my kids to college, but I'll just hope and pray that I have the money and not get a second job, right? The money will be there. And that's really what the legislature did. They weren't very responsible looking forward to say, what are the responsibilities we have in our state to our citizens for the services that they demand and need, whether it's roads or public schools or health care, public safety, state police, fire suppression, water projects, right? So we came into this session with a shortfall. The governor in the fall tried to make up for that with a 3% cut across the board in all state agencies and a 4% rate reduction for all Medicaid services. And that really has been harmful. And we've seen direct result from some of those cuts into Medicaid in particular. 3 people now have died after we cut assertive, these things called ACT teams, assertive community treatment teams, that basically provide wraparound services for people with mental illnesses and keep them in community instead of institutions and keep them on their meds and work, et cetera. Well, those 4% cuts caused that service to be entirely withdrawn. And there have been 3 clients from that program alone who've died. So that's what got us here. And so what the legislature is now doing, instead of using reserve funds to make up the difference of the gap that they created, right? They created that gap by like taking that revenue out. So now they're justifying stark, sharp, damaging budget cuts to all state agencies in the current fiscal year as well as ongoing into next year. And that's really causing a lot of conflict, a lot of tension, a lot of harm, quite frankly. Just today in JFAC, I was talking about the Medicaid budget, and I said, if you're not going to use reserve funds, there's another way that we could balance the budget. But my colleagues don't want to do that. They just want to cut things, and I think it's going to be harming people right now, and it's going to shift costs down the future to higher cost care, like hospital emergency rooms, people going to jail, those kind of things, instead of really positive programs to keep people in their homes.
So obviously with you serving on the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, the budget has been top of mind. But what have been some of your other legislative priorities? What are other bills that you're working on or other things that you have passed or are hoping to get passed with the rest of the legislative session?
Well, I have a few bills I'm very happy and proud about. Most importantly, a bill passed out of the Senate last week, and they're calling it Isaiah's Law. I've been working with a foster, now adoptive parent of some children, and Isaiah's Law really is telling the courts, hey, we're not going to mandate kids go back to visit parents or guardians where there's substantiated abuse. This is a good balance between parent rights and child interests. And I think our state has, for far too long, really thought more about reunification at all cost instead of what's in the best interest for the child, especially if there's been substantiated sexual or physical abuse. So my bill says, hey, we're not going to mandate that. Now, the court still has discretion in case there's something we're missing, and that could overturn that and rule differently. But we got to stop that practice. And so I've been working with families on that, and I think that's got good support, and I think that'll be a major improvement for child safety. That's what I think. That I have 4 bills I'm working on. That's the biggest one. I think that in the limited time I would cover with you today.
And with your legislative priorities, so this November is the election, and the filing deadline was pretty recently, just this last week. So Are you planning on running for re-election, and what are you planning on your main campaign points being?
Yeah, I am going to run for re-election. I'm in my, I served 3 terms in the House. This is my 3rd term in the Senate. I want to go for 1 more. My priorities stay consistent, and that is really advocating and protecting public schools, quality health care, an economy that works for everyone, fair housing, and really protecting our public lands. Those are the top of mind priorities. I think also what I'd like to see, I'm a Democrat, so I'm going to work very hard to help elect more Democrats through the state because I think we really lack balance in our legislature. We're seeing too much extremism from the Republican Party to the point that people won't even vote for a budget because there's federal dollars in it. Over a third of our state budget is through federal dollars, and it's just not feasible or sustainable to, I think, elect folks who can't find common ground or common welfare and just want to take a wrecking ball to the budget as well as state government. So I'm really focused on responsible, efficient, and effective government.
And I know that you've talked about how long you've been in the legislature and kind of what your plans are and what you've accomplished, but what inspired you to first run for public office? What inspired you to become a representative?
Somebody suggested that I should run for an open seat, and initially I thought that was really crazy because I thought, what do I really know about government? I worked in higher education my whole life, 6 different colleges and universities, and the person that asked me to run, really, really looked at me and said, hey, you are qualified. And I share that story because so many people think you have to have a certain resume or a certain set of experiences, but it's really you have the will and the heart to learn and listen and really come to the table to find compromise and advocate strongly for the interests of your district. Folks can do it. I had to learn a lot, trust me, and I'm still learning. But I have a passion for learning. That's probably why I worked in higher education so long. And I had a mother, middle child of 12, born in the Great Depression, and she taught me work ethic. So my top values are fairness and hard work. And she also taught me don't ever let a bully push you down, and you stand up for others. especially if you have a voice to do so. So I am living my mother's legacy. I believe it is essential to stand up to the bully, make sure that everyone is able to have a place at the table. I really try to advocate for those who are shoved aside or marginalized unfairly, that every single person, every human being, everyone has the right to be who they are and live the life they choose and not have a government that would control them or tell them who they should be through policies that limit their access to the American dream. And I'm very serious about that. And I think our country is really struggling right now, going down the wrong road with all these bills that are limiting personal freedom and that are basically, I think, highly discriminatory, and they're treating human beings like objects. And I will stand strongly against that.
And thank you so much today, Senator Wintrow, for joining us today. The last question I want to ask you is kind of a culmination of all of these, but what would you say is the best way for your constituents and the more average, everyday citizen to be involved in the legislative process and with your campaign?
Well, I think, what's really nice about Idaho is I think we are pretty close to the people. I have folks who call or come to my office or email. Quite often will bring a problem or a situation, and I think that's one of the most rewarding parts of my job is that I'm in the position to have a title to help solve problems. Whether it's a veteran who was homeless and wasn't getting assisted living, and I intervened and we got that, right? Or somebody else who was homeless and was going to be taken to jail because they had dementia instead of having them go to the hospital. These are the things that matter, and I can use my title for. So everyday folks, call me. I have a problem, right? I try to solve it or get them to their representatives or senators that can. I think also people should recognize, if you're going to email me, don't use a form letter. Just email me with what comes from your heart. Keep it short, sweet, and to the point because I have thousands to read. I definitely like mail, physical mail. My dad was a letter carrier, a civil servant. I will read a postcard and a card any day of the week, and if you came into my office, you'd see they're all on my wall. So you get involved. This is your people's house. Contact your representatives and senators and congressional delegation, and don't let one unanswered email get in your way. You keep trying and make sure you reach them.
Well, thank you so much again, Senator, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Well, it was lovely to join you, and I just hope everything's going well for all the students, and just keep learning and look for you in the State House.